Welcome back to Tumor Board with Hilario and Aneesh. I'm your co-host Aneesh.
And this is Hilario.
If you're joining us on YouTube or watching our video on Spotify, you can see that Hilario has a different Arsenal jersey.
Oh my God.
But that's not why we're here. Today we're going to talk about medical school, the preclinical years, the clinical years, and really everything that we feel like you need to know.
Okay. All right.
So let's get started. Hilario, was medical school really that hard? As hard as I said?
Who said that?
Basically everyone.
Everyone? Yeah. Okay. So I guess like it depends on who you're asking, right? Like I feel like for people that are definitely not in like the sciences, right? Med school is really difficult, and I don't want to minimize the sacrifices and the intensity of med school, but for me, the hardest thing I could have gone into when I was getting done with pre-med and bio in undergrad was to go into a business school, right? Like I don't know anything about business.
Yeah, I guess
at
it's
the time, right? So if you ask me, business school or doing a master's in business or something would have been a lot harder for me than going into med school. That aside, I do think med school did have its challenges and time constraints and material, the things that you have to learn and be good at. That I don't think is any more unique from like other professional studies for those individuals that go into that professional studies.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably because I don't want to come across that like, med school is so unique that, we're doing so much harder work than, let's say, dental school or like, let's say, law school or let's say someone who is in a PhD program, like, doing bench work and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very winded answer to your question. But what do you think?
I think after my latter years of med school, leaving med school, talking with other people and other professionals with law school, dental school, business school, med school is for the most part, a one path thing. Right? They give you curriculum, you go through the curriculum, you do your best to do well, but can be very challenging and time consuming to do well. And other schools, there's maybe more flexibility in terms of classes you're taking. Maybe other things are more important, like networking or practicing in a specific clinic or something like that they incorporate in the school as part of the school curriculum. But I think the uniqueness of the challenge in med school is really the time that you spend in your coursework and essentially the fact that your schedule, especially when you get to your hospital years, is not yours. It's given to you. And I think that makes things really challenging. You will spend a lot of time, and we'll talk about it, but you'll spend a lot of time in the library or wherever you study, and in and out the hospital. And I think that can make it very difficult.
Right. So, I mean, I think then your question probably is twofold, right? Is the preclinical years as difficult as they say it is? And is the clinical years, as difficult as they say it is? I think I probably would say the clinical, years, especially like moving from just being in a classroom and just doing, like classwork and then going to the clinic, that transition I think was a lot harder than even I anticipated in terms of like applying the things you've just learned over 2 years to patient care and all that kind of stuff. So yes, that part, yes, but I think the first 2 years I would say it's comparable to a lot of other like professional studies in some ways.
So
Do you remember your first day in med school, and where did you go to med school, Anish?
yeah, so I went to the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx. So my first day of med school, actually, they allowed maybe about 60 students or so, about 1/3 of the class, to actually come earlier for about 2 weeks and like get adjusted. And I wasn't part of that, but my roommate was. So I ended up moving in like a week earlier compared to most of the people. And I would say it was a lot of fun. Actually, we just kind of hung out, got to know each other, and kind of became friends with people pretty early on. I will say, as soon as the first day of med school happened, like the first official day when we had class and stuff, some of us, we went to the library like day one, and we're like, man, we got to get on top of this. We're going to be so behind. We went to one of the group like rooms where there's enough seats for multiple people, and we're like, all right, this is gonna be our group, our study group forever, and we're gonna meet twice a week.
Right.
Never met after that. It was a total fail. I think we may have met maybe once after, but that was a complete fail. And we realized we all studied differently, and we weren't a group that I think we're friends, but we didn't vibe totally on the whole study game.
Right. I mean, I think that's a really good point, because the way I felt before I went to med school was that like you did mostly like pre-med, right, in undergrad, and in pre-med you're sort of like thinking as everybody as your competition into getting into medical school, right? And you learn to like study independently of other people. And then when you get to med school, the idea now is like we're going to try and have you learn and work with other people. We did have this like interdisciplinary like meetings, right, where we learn with the pharmacy students, the podiatry
that's
students.
Cool. I did not have that. Right. That's pretty cool.
And then the dental students, right? And trying to achieve like the same goal, right? It's like that for most students, at least in the very beginning, felt more like it felt like they're trying to like ask you to do something that you haven't really done before,
and collaborate more.
Yeah, collaboration, which is not really the orientation of like a lot of people that just got into med school. It's like they're always thinking the other person is a competition, right? And you're always like trying to study independently. In terms of my first day, I don't really remember much of my first day. I went to a medical school at Temple University, so pretty local. But in terms of like my first day, I don't remember it so much because, like you, I had the opportunity to start what's called medical school earlier. So we had this summer program, which I believe was about 4 or 6 weeks, where actually Dr. Shulman was an organizer of that. So Dr. Shulman is a mutual colleague, right, in radiation oncology,
one of our senior residents.
Right. So she, with another physician, now organized this program to kind of get people acclimatized to the coursework and some of the things that med students may need to know before they start a medical school. So I applied for that program and I got into. So I was on campus for about 6 weeks, and I got to experience what being a med student was for a while before my other classmates kind of came in. So I don't remember the first day, but I do remember trying to form a study group with some of the people that I did this program with right before things started for real. And it fizzled out like you within a couple weeks. I think we all remain very good friends overall, but I don't think that we anticipated how difficult it was going to be studying in a group and kind of what our roles. I think what the difficulty that we found was our role and knowing and trusting the other person to do certain things while you do another thing. I think the tendency was to try and do everything, right? Because, let's say we're doing biochemistry, our group studies was, read the material that we have been set to read, right? And then every individual will explain certain portion of it, right? And then we'll do questions together and we go over those questions, whichever ones that we got wrong, and try and whoever understands it better, try and explain part of that, and it just ended up with people having this, ideas of oh, I can do it better. Oh, I can teach you this. I can do it that. Yeah, it was very competitive, and I am competitive, but I also felt like it's just I was wasting my time. Spending 2 hours for something that I thought I could study, I could do in maybe 45 minutes, right? Because I'm working in a group. So I guess that may be the reason why that initial group study didn't work out.
Yeah, I will also want to touch on one thing you said. I felt, and did you have a pass-fail curriculum your first couple years, or was it all based on grades?
I think it was grades, but there was a certain grade that you passed, right? So they gave you grades, but also it had a pass-fail component to it.
Okay.
Right.
So we had a pass-fail component our first 2 years, and I loved it. I thought it was the best thing because what ends up happening, you come into school and you're actually pretty excited. You're here, and it's a really interesting feeling where everyone is intelligent. I felt like everyone was smarter than I was.
Right.
And you all work hard. That's why how you got into med school, and you're all driven, and you all want to be doctors. Maybe you don't know, what specialty, etc. But it's not like in college where, you felt like maybe someone won't, just felt like people were different, maybe different tiers or just different areas, and you're not all driven to the same goal. Everyone's studying something differently. But here, it was a very different feeling. And having that pass-fail component actually made things super collaborative in my first couple years of classes, because it doesn't matter. We had no grade. It doesn't matter if you get 95% or you get 75. A pass is a pass. Now, to get the 75 is still challenging. You still have to study.
Right.
But you weren't worried about, there was no class distribution that anyone knew. There was no real ranking that you could compare yourself to someone else. And I think that really fostered a great environment. And I say that because, also, I realized kind of early on that I was more of a solo studier. I did the group thing, like everything in a group, and it was not working. So, but what I did like was after I would look at things solo, I ended up finding a few people who we really connected well in that study. We may not have even been friends, but we were study friends, and we'd meet up and we would hash things out in a group environment to really, hone our knowledge base and kind of reinforce things. But I think that was really only something you can do when everyone knows, hey, it doesn't matter what this guy next to me, what grade he has. We're here to help each other.
Right. So what do you think a grading system would have done, or in what ways would that have affected how you study with your colleagues?
I have friends who had been to med school where they had a grading system: honor, high pass, pass, fail, or maybe even some variation of A, B, C.
Right.
And they had extremely different experiences. And I wouldn't say just on the academic level. So the academic level, I think, again, it really fostered collaboration. I would even study with different people. I would meet different people in the library or study area and kind of hash things out. And sometimes it's nice because everyone thinks about something differently. And so you approach problems and questions and, like pathways that you're learning very differently.
Right.
But also foster friendships because you can meet people. You can hang out with them. You don't feel like I have this very small group of people and everyone else I'm kind of competing with. I don't even have to feel like I'm competing with my friends. There's always that small thing where feeling like, oh, like we're, me and my buddy, we're studying together, we're also competing against another, and we're all kind of competitive people, but you can really foster great friendships. And I think, my school actually 90, maybe more than 90% of the students lived on campus, and we had 3 buildings where people normally live. So we pass fail, and we all lived there. And so we could actually foster real friendships, hang out with people on our own time. I would go down to some of my best friends' place, or like 10 floors down, and study with them, hang out with them. And I think it really built like a good camaraderie and environment where my other friends, who I know were really kind of sad in med school and really didn't have a good social network or crew of people. And I felt for them because that's so important when you're going through this process.
Right. So these other friends that you knew that had like this grading system, I'm assuming that they knew what other people's grades were and where they fit in, whether those people had high pass, honors, all that kind of stuff. Because I feel like you have to know where everybody stands, right? When people know each other's ranking in society, right? That's when people start giving more reverence to other people and looking down on others, right? But I think that even if you had this, grading system, this, honors and pass and all that stuff, and people just kept it to themselves, right? Then there isn't any way for someone to feel inferior or someone to feel, higher and pompous over another person that they just met, right?
Right.
So it sounds like it was kind of like an open thing where everybody knew everybody's grades, right?
I don't know I don't think every one of those people knew everyone's grade, but what I do feel like is, just inherently you're competing against your next student. And that means when you apply to residency and other things, like your grades will be there. And, people want to make sure that they set their future on a good path. And I think it just inherently, it kind of maybe fosters those feelings. Gotcha. I mean, I will say, I know people even in pass fail system, I know they were scoring better than me on certain subjects. You just end up knowing that, but at least you don't feel that, and you feel like you can go to them for help,
right?
And not
so
going to them.
You felt like the people you were studying with, were in class with, at the end of the day, if you both had passes, right, your school wasn't going to put them highly over you when you were doing like applications and they had to write something about you.
At least for the first 2 years. Okay. Obviously, that changed on rotations where we had a grade, and obviously step 1 has its own score.
Right.
But I think it really does a great job of fostering that collegial, collaborative environment where you can thrive and go through a tough school and regimen in a more sane and happy manner.
Right. So, I mean, I guess I'll speak about my experience about that. I don't want to, settle too much on this grading thing. Because I think it can get a little bit frothy. People have their own feelings about it. But we did have pass, high pass, honors, right? And obviously fail, right? And you also get your grade, right? But and the school also arranges in I think in like percentiles, right? Whether you're in like a 10 percentile, right, and all that kind of stuff. And
did they tell you what percentile you're in?
Yeah, so any individual knows where they fit in. And some people probably knew, what their friends and what quarter or what percentile they fit in. But I think that at least my school was unique in the sense that I didn't get the feeling that people were, competing,
like out to get you.
out to get you, and and people were unhappy because of what people fit in, right, in terms of grades. And that may say something about where I was in that grading system and being maybe sometimes like oblivious of what is going around in terms of what people really felt about this grading system. That's what I really think happened, right? And another component was that, like, even though some group studies didn't really work out very well, I think in our preclinical years we did have a lot of time where our grades were dependent on the group work. So we did spend a lot of time doing this problem-based learning curriculum where we had cases and we had questions that we had to sit together with an attendant in our midst and kind of discuss our answers to questions, and the collective grade that we got individually, right, was based on what we could come up with as a group, right? So I suspect that played maybe a role in like up to half of our grade in every class. And then obviously we did have midterms and we did have finals, right? But that idea, I think that may be like a very good pro of the PBL like system that people were trying to foster around the time that we went to med school, right? So I didn't get that sense so much. So I think that may be different from other schools where they are not adopting, that kind of like, group work and that kind of like environment, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And for maybe the medical school listeners, here, that may actually matter in terms of what kind of school you want to apply to, right? Because if you're a purely independent person, right, and you don't really want to like do a lot of this, group work, and I kind of get into it. I think it might help to know what schools actually really emphasize that and what schools do not. I will say though, as any individual though, I think like we need to learn how to work in groups, because like in rural medicine, right, you have to learn how to work with a multidisciplinary like team, right? So maybe knowing the schools that do that and the schools that do not do that can help you either avoid some or even engage in or apply to some of those schools, right? And I think that's a pretty interesting thing that you bring up, that people were actually like unhappy based on the kind of competition and the kind of like environment that like this individualistic kind of like grading kind of like fostered,
Yeah, I think the culture of the school is important. I think you want. We didn't have much problem-based learning, but I know things have changed a lot now, and I think the culture that the dean set, that the administrators set, I think really does play a role. And I would, if you're applying, definitely talk to current students to see,
Right.
Get the real down low on the actual schools.
Right. All right. So changing the topic, do you remember your first day in anatomy?
I remember my first day in anatomy. I do. We had a group of, I think it was 4 of us, and it was definitely a really interesting experience. You walk in, and I mean, it smelled awful. I will say that. I still smell the smell. I can like think about that smell because for those of you who don't know, they have to preserve the bodies, and I think it's like formaldehyde.
Yep, formaldehyde. Yeah.
Yeah, just reeking everywhere. And we walk in and get introduced to our first patient, is what they really refer to them as, and we kind of go from there. You don't know who you're going to end up with. Everyone's body type, size, sex is all different. But you end up spending a lot of time there. And I don't know if you did your own dissections. I know some med schools, they actually have one of the professors do most of it.
Mm-hmm.
We actually did everything, and I think it was very tedious and not necessary.
No, we
but
did.
it was an
We did our
interesting
own.
time.
We did our own too
Yeah,
as well. Yeah.
it was, the reason I say that is because sometimes we were not the greatest dissectors,
Uh-huh.
but we did it. We did it. What was your favorite part of anatomy?
Yeah. I mean, before I answer that, I do remember like first day of anatomy, and I think that in our school there was this kind of program where we get to meet the family of our
Oh
first
wow.
patient,
Okay.
because it was important to acknowledge and also be grateful, for the people that donated,
Wow, that is very powerful. Yeah.
themselves to medicine to help us learn, right? And I remember like meeting the family of our first patient that my group was going to be working with, right? Um, and we did dissect ourselves. I think there was some point to it, in trying to like learn to do kind of like tedious work, which medicine has sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And also finding your way into solutions, right? Is they tell you today we need to like kind of like dissect this like muscle, right? And like
Right.
tag it, right? And you read it from the textbook. We have it open up on the computers, like hanging up on the
Hmm.
ceiling, and then you try and dissect that out, and some of it is tedious, and some of it you need to work with your colleagues, right? So this is another way that we were also learning how to work in a team very well, and I enjoyed a part of being able to like do that. I didn't want the professors like having dissected it out already for us. It just
Yeah, I
didn't
think
seem
at least some of
very
that section
genuine. Yeah.
is good and necessary. What was your favorite part of dissecting?
I do remember the favorite part was the brachial plexus because we were
Mm.
really fixated on like the brachial plexus and like how it works and all that, especially in the beginning of med school. So I remember like being able to have all of them clean all from like the roots cleanly,
Mm.
right, and like all in the arrangements the same way as it is in the textbooks was like pretty cool. And obviously like seeing different variation of
Mm.
anatomy, right? Because they didn't for some people it didn't look the same as a textbook, right? But the brachial plexus was very like a very small discrete goal where you can actually see something that you're learning in the textbooks and also seeing that also on an individual, right?
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
was pretty cool. And I'll probably say the second favorite thing was also when we did the CNS part of it, and also
Mm.
finding out like the different like cranial nerves and stuff like that.
Okay.
That
Okay.
was also an interesting part of anatomy. What about you?
You mentioned meeting your patient's family. We didn't have a program like that, but we always suspected our patient was homeless just because his anatomy was not great, like gaunt, just like the inward stomach. I'm forgetting
Mm-hmm.
the term now, but um, when we would open things, it was just like not really looking like in any healthy capacity. And I always felt bad for him because obviously it seems like he lived a tough life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so sometimes we would dissect. The brachial plexus was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I did like that, but I think his like muscle, just the tone of it was just really um, not very easy sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a little challenging. I would say I actually liked, and it's going to maybe sound really weird, but I liked dissecting skin. I thought it was, I thought it was,
That is
I
weird.
thought it was kind of enjoyable. Actually, it was like, oh, like plastic surgery skin, but it was actually kind of
Gotcha,
like,
gotcha. So you enjoy the part that you felt was related to plastic surgery.
well, I enjoyed I thought it felt satisfying to
Okay.
remove, and it just felt like I don't know, it just felt satisfying. It felt satisfying to. I know. I'm not Dexter, but it felt satisfying. I will say I think the hand was really interesting. We went in the hand and we would seal the hand muscle. There's so much stuff going on.
And
there.
the tendons. I remember the tendons was like a big deal.
Tendons were really surprising to me. How kind of firm they were.
Right.
Yeah.
I think another thing that stuck out with me with in anatomy was also seeing diseases in people.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Which is really interesting. I do remember seeing like nodules that we've seen in like prostate cancer, right? It was this like 80-something-year-old gentleman, and he probably had like prostate cancer, right? Because of that kind of nodules that we saw on his prostate, for example, right? And then a woman that had fibroids, right? You saw fibroid, right, on the uterus, right? Yeah. And that was pretty. That was pretty interesting. Yeah.
The lungs I felt were really interesting. I think my guy was a smoker. And the lungs were not like what I had expected lungs to look like.
What did it look like? Is it black?
It wasn't like fully black, but it was a little black. But it was like the consistency also, the lung, and maybe it's because he's already passed away, right? In the body, but it looked just different than it just felt different as well, a little more spongy
than some of the other.
It just felt really different as well, and the heart was interesting too. Yeah, it's a cool course. It's definitely obviously unique to med school, but it's a cool course.
Right. Yeah. So I do think the anatomy is probably my favorite like subject in medical school. So now I guess we can talk about a little bit about time management. So how much did you feel like you needed to study in medical school, and how did you really work out your time between studying and also doing other fun things with like friends and like family? And I'm going to stack that one more time. So I know that some schools also do this, like you have to be there for the lectures, and some schools also pre-record them. So maybe take that into account when you're talking about this time management stuff.
Yeah, I think that is a huge thing. Either pre-record lectures or not. Initially when I was, I think a lot of my first classes, it was basically all lectures, like a lecture format. And I mean, I went to them all my first year, but
you had to show up for them.
So I think most of them, you had to show up for. But I also quickly realized, like, why am I even bothering showing up? I learned absolutely nothing going there, only because you're spending all this time in lecture. Your attention can only last a certain amount of time.
Right.
It's just impossible to be so engaged and take all the notes in some 3-hour, 4-hour format. And what I realized my second year is I shouldn't actually go, and I should just watch the recording lectures. That way I can make kind of my own schedule. And obviously when I have to show up, I have to show up, but I can maybe study in that time during lecture, and then afterwards listen to the lecture. But I will say I was guilt tripped sometimes because I'll be, my friends are going, I should go. And, maybe I'll get something. And every time I'd be like, maybe I'm going to get something. And then
your friends were going to lecture and you felt like you needed to go to.
Yeah, okay. But then I would always regret it because I'd always be like, why did I bother going? I could have done X, Y, and Z and then listened to the lecture after. And I think that is definitely something you should try to kind of figure out early on, because it gives you a lot of freedom. Maybe you go to the gym a certain time. Maybe you can. Some people are like, I'm so engaged in the morning. That's why I lecture. But I actually end up feeling like I am engaged in the morning, and that's when I should actually hit the books. And because then I felt like lecture was not when my mind is like I can do lecture when my mind is not as active.
Right. Yeah, I do have a very short attention span. I found out in med school, kind of like hearing someone else talk on a screen, right? Or like in front of us. I was told in this, remember I said I went to this program before med school started. And, part of the things that we want to help on was like figuring out what style was going to be good for you as an individual, right? And in the beginning, I guess like we were all kind of like encouraged to look at med school as a job. So if you're doing a 9 to 5 job, right, that's roughly 8 hours that you have in the day to study whatever you're learning at any point in time. And it did help that we were doing one subject at a time, right? And then moving on to the next one. So in the beginning, I went to lectures, and I think maybe within a couple months, I realized that I was probably like, paying attention like a quarter of the time that I was in lectures. And they were also super early, right? And I wasn't really the greatest morning person, right? So I realized that like, so I was waking up very early to get to like a 7 a.m. class, right? Or sometimes like an 8 o'clock class. And I also felt like I wasn't retaining as much as I wanted to. But the peak times were like I'm really like, a wide awake and like really ready to go and really learn was around 9 to 10, right? So over time, I just realized that, okay, maybe I can go to lecture because I like the regimen of like waking up and, going to lecture and being up and getting into the mode of like doing the things that I need to do. But I didn't feel like I was benefiting fully. So I would go to lecture for some of it, right? And then go to the library afterwards. So I will get out of lecture, like maybe like halfway through when I realized I couldn't really retain anything anymore, right? And so that I could also see friends, right? Because some friends were it worked for them to like really go to lecture. So I would go see some friends in the beginning, absorb something in the beginning, and then get out and go to the library and then go over the things that I just learned that I actually remembered, and then wait till they put up all the recordings on there. So by maybe like 9 o'clock or so, the recordings already be up, and then I'll kind of play it over and try like do the rest of it. And just having the approach that I was going to do this 9 to 5 like a job kind of helped because I had a little bit more time to actually read it and also also go over some of the textbook. I think one of the tensions in like kind of how we manage time during med school was studying for the med school tests and also being able to cover like the first aid textbook. So for those of you that don't know what the first aid textbook is, like the Bible of like medical school education, where in your clinical years you study that to take your first board exam, right? And there was a lot of ways where first aid was really just trying to pull out the high yield stuff in those board exams, right? And that always didn't kind of like align with what we were really learning in class, because we're learning a lot more and sometimes even more relevant than what first aid was teaching us. So I wanted to be able to cover it in line with the subjects. So it gets a little bit difficult trying to do that and also do what the lectures were asking of us. But just having that, approach that, this is a 9 to 5 job, I think helped me a little bit more to like manage it. I wasn't successful most of the time, of course. But having a game plan, I feel like even when you're not successful, whatever you're able to do is still an advantage that you have over having no plan, right?
Yeah, and I would say that that's important. Are you better studying in the morning or are you better studying in the evening? Because some people even that they're more night people, So I think that knowing that is very important. I will also say, getting that schedule down, it'll I felt like for me, it just constantly changed depending on like what class it was, what the schedule, like the schedule they're giving to me is. I do feel like I would oftentimes at least study for a bit in the evening just because I would go to class. And that's why I say I kind of regretted that I went to class, and I wish I mostly kind of did it on my own. And then went through the lectures on my own, took notes on my own time.
Right.
And one thing kind of, fun that I enjoyed when you watch lectures later is like you can do 1.5x, you, can do 2x, you might be listening to this podcast at 2x, you know,
Right,
and
right.
It's just sometimes like that processing is much easier because you're getting rid of all the filler nonsense and you can just focus on.
Okay.
And the other thing is when you go to class, you may not be able to write down the notes as you want to at the time. Maybe just it's going a little faster for you. Maybe you miss something, you have to compare with your classmate. But when you're watching it later, and you may end up having to watch it later anyways,
right,
figure out what you missed or ask your friends. So you just use a lot of time. But yeah, I would say, you know, basically what you said, that time management and figuring out the schedule, and it may change over time. You may end up changing even how you take notes. Maybe you using a software like OneNote, or maybe using your notebook. That may also take some time to figure out and maybe different for every class.
Right. Yeah, I mean, definitely you don't want to like be static. I think there's certain things that should remain in terms of like, oh, I really want to have a time that I set up for when I'm studying. But I think your studying style should be a little bit dynamic because some of the subjects are going to be different, right? Like anatomy is mostly hands-on, right? And then like watching like pictures of like, you know, being able to point out muscles, nerves, and all that kind of stuff. So much different from pharmacology, right? Where, you know, we're just mostly learning learning about like medicines, right? That we can give our patient, or even microbiology, which had like, you know, different way that you have just a lot of memorization, right? That you have to do. So I don't think that, you know, you need to have the same style of studying, but I think that, you know, the structure that you set for yourself will really put you up for success or failure, I think, in medical school.
Yeah, and I would add just for the time management, there's always someone studying at some time. You know, everyone's different, and like, don't feel bad if you're like, oh, you know, it's Saturday morning and I'm studying.
Right.
There's definitely someone studying, and if you're not studying, then someone else is studying.
Right. Yeah, you know, you don't want to look at people. I think there was certainly, if there was anything that I saw, there were people that felt guilty going to do something else when they were done with, like, if you're truly done with studying for the day and you see a bunch of people in the library, there isn't any reason to really like feel guilty going to, like, let's say, have fun. Or
it's very easy to feel guilty.
Right. I know that because like I had a friend that like always felt guilty about just getting up and going to hang out with her friends or like our family. And it was one of the things that I didn't quite understand, because like, if what you set out to do is done, just go have fun, man. Life is short.
You know, you can only study for so much.
Yeah.
I used to allocate some time, at least, you know, even just for like a 30-minute hour or whatever every day to hang out with my friends nearby. I do think it's important. You know, on the weekends, I felt like there wasn't as much time in the weekdays to study, so I felt like the weekends were important to catch up and study at least one day.
Right.
But I think it's important, you know, maybe you like to go out to, you know, drink, whatever. Maybe you want to just hang out low key, go to a museum, whatever it is. Just, I think at least one weekend day, you got to do you, even half a day, whatever it is. I think allocate at least some hours. And, you know, it's not like maybe your other friends or your family where maybe they would hang out, they're just hanging out for the whole weekend. You're going to have to come back and hit the books. But at least you can spend some time with people and try and make that a priority.
Right. So speaking about like spending time with people besides, you know, studying, what did you do for fun in medical school? And maybe just talk a little bit also about, you know, the sacrifices you felt like you had to make while you were in medical school.
Yeah, I think, you know, one thing that I feel like I did was, if I could, I would plan in advance. So, you know, your test schedule, you kind of know like what weekends you're going to have to really buckle down and like not do anything. So I would try and, especially if, you know, there's a family event or whatever, you know, I'd be like, okay, I'm blocking off that day and like 2 weekends from now to go to this thing and to make sure I'm there. I maybe can't spend the whole weekend, but maybe one day. And I think that for me was a good way of making sure that I schedule and I prioritize that social life. And I ended up actually prioritizing social things in terms of like what I would think about first and kind of doing studying all around it. And then what I would do, I did have a lot of family things going on. So I'd try and, do that. I was not exactly next to Manhattan, but I was nearer. So I would go to the city and, whether it was kind of explore a new restaurant or go to a museum or really just a new event that would pop up that I would enjoy doing that. Sometimes, they had a little college feel to it and we'd go out in a big group and go out in town and have fun. And that was one thing maybe unique to my med school. I think there was like a party hard culture with some people, and like I enjoyed doing it. I did, and went out sometimes. But I think there's a variety of things that I did to really kind of keep sane. One thing that was fun, especially in the spring and even during my step 1 studying, Game of Thrones would come out, and we would have a Game of Thrones watching. It was like Sunday night. We're watching it live, 9 p.m. There's like 10 of us in my buddy's room, or like he had like a living area, and we'd all watch Game of Thrones, and then we'd spend another half hour talking about the episode, and then we'd go and sleep. And it was just kind of like a ritual. We catch up, we watch Game of Thrones, and and we kind of go from there. At least we all see each other once a week.
Oh, that sounds like you had a lot of fun in med school.
Yeah, it was good. It was. I think one of the most surprising things for me was that I was able to, I guess I just wasn't thinking about it beforehand, but I was able to form like a very strong friend group that we all, keep in touch more. Some, maybe closer to others. We go on trips together, we hang out together still, and we're still very close. So I think that was definitely, not exactly expected, but it was a great thing that happened.
Right. So folks, you can have fun in medical school.
Yeah, you can.
You can. Okay. All right. So, what sacrifices do you feel like you had to make? I know you just went over. You did trips with friends, right? You watched Game of Thrones, right? You went to museums, events, and all that kind of stuff. But did you feel like there were any sacrifice that you making that maybe your other colleagues or people not even in medicine, friends that you didn't have in medicine, were making at the time?
Yeah, I would say, I touched on going to family things, but it was really challenging. There would be a lot of stuff, and I would want to go see people, but, just can't because I have exams. I have to study. And I know how much work I needed to do, and I just can't go. One of my cousins ended up getting married during my dedicated step 1 period. And it was like a multiple day event thing, and like families there all the time, but I just couldn't go. I had to go. I was like, all right, I will be there for the wedding. I'll be there at the reception, but I'm not gonna, I may sleep over, but I'm not gonna, I'm not really gonna drink. I'm not really gonna stay up late. I'm just gonna sleep, relatively earlier side, wake up in the morning and leave. I'm not gonna be there the whole time. But I showed up, and it was nice to show up, but I really had to, but I see the pictures.
You were restricted in some way, right?
I think there's a lot of restrictions when that you have during that time. Also, my other friends, they hit me up, oh, I'm coming to the city, I'm doing this. I'm like, dude, I can't. I gotta study. Like, or maybe I can, but I have to really try and plan and really try and be like, okay, I'm gonna go here. I can spend like 2 hours, and then I got to bounce, unfortunately, with you. And I felt, especially, this is like prime time, this is prime time in your life. I was 22 when I entered, 26, 27. I did a research here, but I was 27 when I left. And this is like prime time. Your friends are making money. They're hanging out. They have weekends that are totally free. And though technically your weekends are free, like you're not working, you're actually not free.
It's not free. It's not free.
You're doing stuff. You got to study. You can't really do what they can do. And I think, you'll realize there is really a lot of sacrifices to be made. You're in your bubble, for more or less, and that bubble comes with downsides. And I think it's important to realize, hey, like try and enjoy what you're doing now. It's
Right.
tough, especially when you're like in the library,
Right.
but try and enjoy what you're doing now. There is a light, but try and focus on what you can control.
Yeah. I mean, this are all very, very valid sentiments you putting out
There is
there.
definitely sacrifice, though.
yeah, there is. I guess for me, I had a really good undergrad experience, but I felt like medical schools is where I met the coolest group of people ever in my life, right? They're coming from all walks of life, right? And varied experiences, and they're all trying to be, do things to set them apart from everybody else, right? So you meet these unique individuals that just knows like the weirdest things, right?
Yeah.
and have the weirdest
We're all
nerds
as
right.
So,
yeah, we're all nerds, but like people like have like things that they're really good at and doing, and and whatnot. So I was a little bit of a social butterfly, so I had like pockets of like groups of people that like I hang out with. I wasn't like, oh, this is my group and that was it, right? So I had a group of friends that would play soccer, just solely soccer together, right? So I spent time doing like intramural soccer, right? And then on the weekends, the medical school, we had a soccer team, and we played with other graduate schools in the city. So that was something that I really enjoyed doing. And then I had my core friends where like these are friends that like I invited to my wedding and stuff, right? Core friends that we get together to like go out and eat and go to museums, right? And just like cook together and all that kind of stuff, right? So there's certainly time you can make for that kind of friendships and that kind of activities. I would say that just like there is time constraints in like even dating, right? Giving attention to the people that you love, right? Your family. And I think the big sacrifice I probably made in medical school was being able to go back home to Ghana, right? When I was in medical school. Because when are you going? When you think about it, you start medical school, when are you really going to do that? Never, right?
Yeah, that is a big sacrifice.
You really don't have that kind of time, in the first summer of my first year, after my first year, I was thinking, obviously, at the time of ENT, you need research experience, right? Yeah. So you spend that time doing research, right? You don't want to go to Ghana for 3 days or a week, right? Because you spend a lot of money to go to Ghana, and I don't want to go there for a week. And then we got to think about, as med students, you don't have money. So, like, how are you even going to afford going to Ghana, right? As well. So those are all, like, I feel like sacrifices that you make. My family lived in the Boston area, so that was a distance too, right? So if I wanted to go see them, I had to make sure I was planning very, 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 very well. Spend the weekend over there, and as much as I like to think that when I'm with family, I'm going to study, it never happened. So I had to decide whether this was, I was done with studying before I can go, or don't go at all, right? Because you're balancing this different, like, interests, and they're in some ways very important, right? So sometimes it's not very clear which one you should pick, right? So for me, that those were some of the sacrifices that I felt like I ran into in med school, and maybe other people run into similar sacrifices, but it's a very unique to medical school. It's like, you gotta find time for the people that you love, and that's not very obvious all the time when you can do that. So was there anything that was surprising about your med school experience that you came out of and it's like, this was a really good experience?
There's like a saying with medical school, it's like you just become tight because you're all kind of going through this,
right?
And you realize early that it's like actually very true. You are all going through this unique experience. I think one thing and this is very unique to my med school, we had an elevator. Every building had their own issues. We had one one time when there was actually carbon monoxide poisoning in the buildings, and we all had to leave. And
Oh wow.
we all had to leave. No one told us anything initially, but we did find out later. And you, we have people. There's people who stayed at my house. A couple people stayed in like a restaurant nearby, at someone else's restaurant their family owned.
Right.
And you kind of go through these random, I think, experiences that make you close with people. And I think, what was surprising was people are very, helpful. They're very nice. And I think when you go through the rest of your college years, you go through, you'll see a whole gamut of the kind of people. But I think, like, you stick together for the most part. And I think I would, going through the education I went through, I would honestly trust many people who went through that education. If I had like a medical issue, I would reach out to them. And really, I actually would, there's people I know, maybe we're not friends, but I would totally reach out to them and be like, hey, like I have some family or, myself with this issue. And I think that is a really cool thing to know, that you can depend on those people. And what I would say is that I met people who inspire me really, and who I think make me want to be better professionally and grow, and always kind of improve on myself.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's good stuff, though. That's good stuff. I guess I was really surprised how many groups there were, or interest groups there were in medical school. I just felt like, you go to medical school and all you're doing is really studying, right? Yeah. But there were so many interest groups, and a lot of them really good, actually. I did a little bit of a cooking class, which was supposed to be this like elective, but it was this like neat group that had been formed in the medical school that I went to.
Oh, that's cool.
Where we spent time just like, learning recipes, but they're supposed to be recipes that are like short, right? So that for med students, you don't have a lot of time, presumably, right? And you want to cook something quick, but you want to cook something that tastes good and also healthy, right? So we had this like, this class, and actually the Philadelphia Inquirer came and like, interviewed us and videoed us for all of that, and we were actually in the newspaper in the Philadelphia Inquirer. But that was like a very like really nice and also surprising like experience that I had in one semester. I think the kind of support groups that I had in like SNMA, right, the Student National Medical Association, which I was the treasurer of at some point. I can't believe they trusted me with their money. But yeah, I had such a great time just hanging out with those folks, and just like genuinely seeing that these are like young people that really care about like the well-being of other like medical students, right? And making sure that they fit in, they were able to like adjust better from like, college or whatever walk of life they were coming from into medical school. I think that was very remarkable experience that I had in medical school. Did you feel like, there were, some unique like resources that were lacking in your medical school education that you think like medical schools should be thinking about, or even med students should think about when they're going into a particular medical school?
Well, I first want to add something to the surprising part. Just reminds me. I didn't realize, my med school really did a great job of funding trips for those student groups or research. I went to London, Florida, DC, Boston, stayed in a hotel in the city.
Right.
I went to New Orleans. I mean, we would travel. We traveled a bunch. People went to Las Vegas. Like,
wow.
there was a lot of
the med school was paying for that.
Yeah, med school was.
So
paying
that's
for
a great resource, right there.
Yeah, it was not expected. It was awesome. It was not something that we'd expect, especially when you're talking about limited travel time. This was them funding and allowing you to go. So that was really cool. I traveled more in a set of my life in med school than I've done, outside of that. That really get the travel bug. So that was definitely surprising. But in terms of resources, I am surprised that I relied on Wikipedia as much as I did. I will say Wikipedia was amazing.
Really?
There was so many times where I don't know, maybe I just didn't. The information wasn't like conveyed as properly, so that I felt.
You mean the language of it?
The information presented in like a lecture wasn't conveyed in a way that I felt was helpful for me.
Right.
That Wikipedia was great. And then YouTube videos. I mean, I relied on YouTube. Honestly, I would have wanted some of these YouTube people to be my instructor. Like,
right.
Whether it was Khan Academy or this guy.
Oh, I remember that guy.
Khan Academy. I loved his videos on certain topics. They were fantastic. Or there's this guy, I think it's like Armando something.
Yeah. I remember that.
That guy was amazing. He was amazing sketch drawings. And he would really, go through things. There's also sometimes some random people in India or Iran for some reason who would do a great job of explaining stuff. And I relied on YouTube a lot for my, I think, fundamental understanding of things that I was pretty surprised about. So I would say, if you're looking for resources, don't just look at your textbook or your class, like look at these other resources. I felt like they were so helpful to me. Honestly, if I just YouTube, UWorld, First Aid,
Wikipedia.
all you need, and Wikipedia, all you need, really.
Okay. So what about your med school? What resources do you feel like were very key in like trying to make use of it as a medical student?
So they had a mentoring, mentee, like a tutor thing. I thought I didn't actually use it, but I felt like it was very helpful for some of my classmates. Basically, people who did exceedingly well in something, would tutor these people, would tutor students. Right. And it's not like you may not have been doing poorly, but maybe just want to do better. I felt like I was getting that from my friends, so I didn't necessarily use it, but I felt like that was helpful. I think, you can meet professors one-on-one too. I think they did a good job of doing that. Our office, academic office, always open for any questions, or if you were having issues, really, like maybe family life, there's something going on, maybe you're struggling with a course load. I think they did a really good job of addressing that and making sure things were going at a pace that you could handle, maybe changing, when you take a class, or allowing you to take exams at a different time.
Right. And they were flexible in that.
Yeah, they were flexible. Okay. I think people, they just need to know, and they will help you because they're here to help you.
Right.
They want you to succeed.
Right.
And they're just here to help you.
Right. So you do really want a very flexible administration and people that really had your interest at heart, right?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things we were talking about before. Really talk to the students who go to the school, because I think you'll kind of get a sense of how the administration goes.
Right. Because that's not something that you're gonna get from a website, or even talking to some of the administration. You're gonna get that from the actual med students that are in the school, right?
Yeah, you'll get that from the actual med students.
Yeah. I think the one thing that was really important, at least for me, was two things: representation and financial matters, right? So in terms of like finances, right? Like, that's the one thing that they tell my students: just worry about studying in med school, and you're gonna take student loans, and that's it, right? And I think that was a very poor way that generally, like, a lot of the med schools that like I was applying to kind of like approached it. I particularly liked my med school because they gave me like a lot of money to go to a med school, right? Essentially I didn't have to pay tuition, But something they don't tell you is that, beyond tuition, right, there is rooming, right?
Yeah, all
There
those
is
costs are
cost
extra.
of living, right? That you have to figure out yourself. And if, depending on your family background, right, that's something that you have to learn how to budget very well. So for me, I think it was very important that my financial aid office, and her name was Lisa. I still remember her. Like, it's just so in tune with the particular, like, needs of like medical students, regardless of what aid you're getting in the school, right? And how she can help you manage your finances, right? And also when she thinks it's okay for you to borrow money, and when she thinks it's not a good idea to borrow money, right? And the kind of things, like, let's say you need a laptop, how you can, what you can do to be able to pay for it, and all that kind of stuff. I think those were very things that, like, I felt like was important, and I needed someone who knew what they were doing so that I didn't have to worry about it. So I think the sentiment that you get, that, oh, just worry about studying, and just you know leave the finances to the financial aid. I think that comes with the premise that the financial aid people are like really good at what they do, and they really care about your particular situation, not sending out like some generic stuff to you to do, all right, and because it will catch 70% of the people, right, and the remaining 30%, maybe it might look it might not necessarily work out for them. So I think that was a really important resource that I think I really valued when I was in medical school.
Yeah, I think it was actually that that brings up a good point.
Mm-hmm.
I think our finance department was really good as well,
Mm-hmm.
and they reach out to students. You can make an appointment anytime. They
Right.
help, even if you're looking for some outside scholarship, help show you
Mm-hmm.
options for that. And even restructuring loans, really anything. One thing that I thought was cool. My school did offer scholarships. They actually, when you got accepted, they would send you something, and they would be like, "Hey, this is a scholarship." They don't tell you maybe how much money they'll give you,
Mm-hmm.
because I think they may change it based on student.
Right.
But if you put in the work, you may get money, and I did. I did do that. It was
Right.
the best 3-hour essay. It was the highest yield that I
Right.
got.
Right.
Even my friend actually got accepted to another school,
Mm-hmm.
and they were offering him money.
Mm-hmm.
He went to the administration at Einstein, who's like, "Hey, X school is offering me this money,"
Right.
and they ended up giving him that as a scholarship
Right.
because
Right.
they wanted him. So
Right.
there's things that you don't realize you can do even when you are thinking about how to pay for school.
Right.
That you just have to ask and
Mm-hmm.
see what's there, but it doesn't
Right.
hurt to ask.
Right. Yeah, definitely you can bargain when you get into med school. I did do that too. Where there was two choices for me. One of them was giving me more money in terms of covering my tuition and other stuff, and the other one, which I also sort of liked about the same, wasn't. And then I just kind of told them where I'm at, in terms of, this school that I like, and it's your competitor, is giving me this much. Obviously, it looks better, and I feel obligated to go to that over you. Can you match that? And even though they were late in getting back to me, and I didn't go to the other school, they did do that. So if you're a med student and you're applying, right, and you get into that kind of scenario, you can essentially show your financial aid that you're getting from another school as a way to try and get more money for the places that you actually want to go to, right? And there's nothing that you lose from that. The only thing they can say is we can't match it. But most cases, even when they can't match it, they will increase whatever they're giving you a little bit more than what you're getting from the other place, and that may be the difference that you need to be able to go to the place that you actually think you will fit in. So the second other resource that I was talking about was I wanted to talk about was representation, right? So I think it mattered to me the kind of diversity, the kind of people that were within the administration, and the kind of support that I would get as an international student, and also I'm a Black man, right? And knowing the kind of resources within that, and seeing the kind of people that look like me and what they did, right? First of all, was inspirational, right, for me, and also in ways that, like, there are life experiences that are unique to me. Those people can actually see and understand, right, when I went to them. So we had this mentorship program, for individuals that wanted that kind of like relationship with other minority professors, or like even like attendants in the hospital. And that for me was important because there's like only 5% of like graduates that are actually like of African American descent in medical schools, right? And so that little amount of people that are graduating medical school that are actually Black, right, meant that there wasn't a lot of them. And if I wanted to be at a place, I wanted to be at a place where I can see that kind of representation, because you go through med school, right? A lot of the things that you learn, right, comes from just one lens, right? And because we all have different backgrounds, right, the way we interpret medicine, right, sometimes will be different. And we do know representation also affects how patient care is delivered as well, right? So for me, it was important to see people that look like me practicing medicine and how they practiced it, right? And being able to look up to them. Not that I wasn't going to learn anything from other, but I think I wanted that variety of experiences that I wouldn't have got from some of the other places that I interviewed, and I feel like Temple really gave me that. So that kind of factored into my decision making, and so if it's important to you that that you get certain resources before you commit to a medical school, I think this is stuff that you really need to think about, because it might not. This is not stuff that you read on a list. This is not stuff that really comes at the front of your thinking when you're interviewing, because all you're thinking about is, I really want to be accepted, right?
Yeah.
But I think that you don't have to sell yourself short. You gotta look at all the different things that affect your well-being in medical school. So yeah.
This is like the foundational part of your career. So you want to make sure that you set yourself up for success and in an environment that you want.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I feel like this was a good part one conversation about preclinical years of medical school, applying to medical school, right? And what it is that medical students do for fun, and what time management looks like within medical school. So we'll be closing out for this week's episode, and for the next episode, we will be talking more about the clinical years, right?
Yeah, next week's episode, we're going to talk about the clinical years, our time in the hospital, the ins and outs of it, and our experiences. If you have any comments, questions, things you want to share, you can email us, tweet at us. Our info is in the show notes below, so feel free to reach out. And we'll see you again on next episode.
All right. Bye-bye.